lesson 11.5, Factoring Trinomials. The bell ringer for today, we have two binomials we want to multiply. So when we do multiply them, remember that we're going to be using the FOIL method. So it's going to be first, outside, inside, last. My first terms are x times x. My outside terms are 4 times x. My inside terms are 3 times x, and my last terms are 3 times 4. My inside terms are like, so I can combine them, and I end up with x squared plus 7x plus 12. If you're someone who prefers to use the box method, it would look like this: x plus 3, x plus 4, x times x is x squared, 3 times x, 4 times x, 3 times 4, and the terms on the diagonal combine to give me x squared plus 7x plus 12. Number 2, my first terms give me x squared, my outside terms give me negative 2x, my inside terms give me 5x, and my last terms give me negative 10. Inside combined to positive 3x, and there I go. 11.5, Factoring Trinomials. Today we're going to be factoring quadratic trinomials, and when we do, we're going to be kind of going the reverse order of when we FOILed. So we're going to end up with, make sure I have my pen here, we're going to end up with two binomials that are multiplied. So I'm going to end up with something that looks like this. Well, if I were going to FOIL these binomials, I would get a quadratic trinomial because the first terms would give me my first there, g squared. My middle term, 7g, would come from my outside terms and my inside terms added, combined, and then the back term, 10, comes from my last terms multiplied. So let's go ahead and do this, and you'll see, I think, what I'm talking about. In order for me to get g squared in the front, I have to have g and g in front. And in order for me to get 10 in the back, well, the only way to get 10 is 10 times 1 or 5 times 2. So the question you ask yourself is, which of these combinations are going to combine to give me 7 in the middle? Well, that's going to be a positive 5 and a positive 2. Because if we FOILed this, going back to start here, g times g, my first terms is g squared. My outside terms would be 2 times g. My inside terms would be 5 times g. And my last terms, 5 times 2. And those two would combine to give me my 7g, which is what I need. If you're someone that prefers to use the box method, well, you know that you have g squared in the front, and you know that you have a positive 10 in the back, so that has to be g and g. The question is, what combinations can you put here and here that are going to get me 10, and when you combine them on the diagonal, you end up with that 7g that we need. Well, that obviously is going to be a 5 and a 2. So your answer here would be g plus 5 and g plus 2, which is the same as we got when we did the unfoiling method. Okay, so let's do another example. So here we have v squared in the front, so we know that we have to have v and v. What combinations will get me a positive 20? Well, that's 20 times 1, 10 times 2, or 5 times 4. And since everything's positive, we just need to figure out which are going to add to 21. Well, that's obviously a 20 and a 1. Here's another one. Maybe pause the video and see if you can do this one. So I have an A and an A in the front. A few more possibilities in the back. We could have 30 times 1, 15 times 2, 10 times 3, or 6 times 5. Which of those are going to add to give me my positive 13 in the middle. That's going to be a 10 and a 3. So if you FOILed that, you would get back to your start, that quadratic trinomial there. Okay, so well that wasn't too bad. Everything was positive. What happens when everything isn't positive? What happens when my numbers in the back, the last terms, multiply to give me a positive number, but my outside term and my inside terms add to give me a negative? Well, let's look at this for a second here. Let's see. So we have k and k in the front. It's the only way to get k squared. It's k and k. And the factors of 25, there's only two possibilities, 25 times 1 or 5 times 5. We need those two numbers multiplied to give me a positive, but when we add them, they give us this negative 10 here. So that means they're both going to be negative. Negative 5 and negative 5. If you FOILed this, you'd have k squared. Outside is negative 5k. Inside is negative 5k. And in the back, negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. And those combine to give me our negative 10k in the middle, which we needed. So that's our answer. And we could probably write it a little better. K minus 5, since it's the same thing, quantity squared. All right, let's try another. X squared minus 11x plus 18. We know that we have x and x. They multiply to give me positive 18, and they add to give me negative 11. So we're looking at both positives. Could be 18 and 1, 9 and 2, or 6 and 3. Both negatives, I should say. So which combinations are going to add to give me negative 11? That would be a negative 9 and a negative 2. Let's try another. Start pausing the video and giving these a shot on your own if you're ready for them. B times B, we're looking at 10 times 1 or 5 times 2. This one's a little bit different because look, they have to multiply to give me a negative 10. So one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative, but they're going to add or combine to give me a positive 3. So these are the tougher ones. In order to get a 3, a positive 3 in the middle, we need probably a 5 and a 2. So one is going to be a 5 and one's going to be a 2. One of them has to be positive and one negative. In order to get a positive 3, let's make the 5 positive and the 2 negative. And you could FOIL that if you wanted to convince yourself that you would get back to that. And then finally, one more to try here. So I have A and A. We have 56 and 1, 28 and 2, 14 and 4, or 7 and 8. Possibilities to get 56. We need a negative, so one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. And we want them to combine to give us a negative 1. So that looks to me like a 7 and an 8 are going to work because they're 1 apart. And we want a negative sign, so let's make the 8 negative and the 7 positive. All right. So moving on, there's some others to try. What do we know about this? Well, we know that we have a negative here and a positive here. So in order to get a negative, I'm going to have one positive and one negative. The combinations that give me 20, let's list those. Okay, and then in order to get me, I need one positive and one negative, and then they need to add to give me 8. So when one's positive and one's negative in the back, I start looking at, I'm looking at differences here. How do I get 8? Well, 20 and 1 isn't going to give me 8. 5 and 4 isn't going to give me 8, but 10 and 2 would. So I put my 10 and my 2, and then I decide which one is positive and which one's negative. In order for me to have a positive 8, I want the big number to be positive. Okay, so I'm going to open my binomials, P and P, 40 and 1, 20 and 2, 10 and 4, 8 and 5, all combinations that get me negative 40. I need them 3 apart, so that's going to be 8 and 5. And we want a negative 3, so let's make the 8 the negative number. How about this? So here we're looking at a positive in the back and a negative in the middle, so they're both going to be negative. So open them up, get started with my y's in the front, 36 and 1, 18 and 2, 12 and 3, 9 and 4. I think that's all of them. And since they're both going to be negatives, we're going to add those negatives together. 12 and 3 is going to give me 15. So negative 12 and negative 3 are my last terms.